Hello and welcome to this Project in a Box video. This is Trend Analysis Explored. This is the more detailed look through the trend analysis capabilities, taking a practical look at some of the actual tools in operation, as well as a more detailed explanation of how it works. If you wanted the brief version, that's also available, and the link is in the comments section below. Okay, so we start with data, and we're collecting properties at the project level. We've been doing this for many years already, and we collect a very wide range of properties at your project level, and that's up to you what you collect. There are some standard things that are always done for you, and we call these plan properties, and these will collect data from plans, risks and issues that are identified in the system, and they'll collect pre-configured things like the percentage complete of the project, the start date and end date of the project. You can also extend that to collect baseline information out of your project as well, and other particular dates that are set against named tasks in your project. It'll collect things like the costs out of your project, the project current cost, the progress cost, the budget cost, etc. And it'll do things from risks and issues like the total number of risks, the number of open risks, the number of open tasks, all those sorts of things. So a whole load of standard stats. Every time you update the source files, they're updated. Then we can have any other set of things that you want to collect from spreadsheets. So you might be having a spreadsheet for collecting benefit information, in which case you might bring back things like your so benefit stats. We can see some of those here, in fact, for the current project. The total count of benefits, number positive, number negative, the budget value of benefits, the current delivered value, how many are on track, etc. So a whole load of different stats you determine in Excel. They're pulled out and dropped into the database. You can do that for finances, for benefits, for health and safety, for anything else that you want to collect in a spreadsheet. And therefore, that's where you get quite a large divergence of the sort of data that comes in for each project type. If you're running an idea, a project demand, project funnel type arrangement, you might be scaling and scoring your projects with data collected in that way as well, as we are in this particular example. So a whole load of different things that you're going to collect. We also have a database which allows you to define and collect your own fields. These are often set for organizational level things like which department, who the sponsor is, status for the project, etc. And those are things that you'll enter for each project. So you have all those different points of data coming in against your project, and we always hold in a data table the latest value for each of those. But what we're doing now is we're automatically storing a new data point into the history table every time that changes. So that means that you can always see the latest point of data, but you can also see the history of when those have changed. Now there's a very specific point there. We're storing when things change, not every time a file is checked in. So as we can see here, the progress and actual costs are coming from the plan file. The budget cost is coming from the plan file as well, but they don't change on the same frequency, even though every time you change the file, they could change. They don't always. So you'll see this particular version of the file, both of these change because we must have changed the percentage complete, and so the progress cost has changed, and the actual cost has changed because we've changed the actuals as recorded against the plan. But on this one here, we've just updated the actuals and not the percentage complete. Here the percentage complete, but not the actuals. Here, all three, both of those have changed, but also the budget cost has changed, and that's obviously changing less often because you don't normally change the budget once your project is running. There may be some variations in it or some extra work's been included, something like that. So this is the raw data, and actually that's collected and stored down to the second information. So here we're just looking at a table with summaries by months, but we can see in some months we collect multiple data points. So here in October we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different data points of differing types, sometimes all three, sometimes one, or sometimes two of those properties changing. Some months we'll have no data, and so that leads to a variation in data, which we often want cleaning up, and actually the system does all that for you to produce nice neat timelines which fill in all the gaps that you're interested in. So let's go and have a look at that in a bit more detail. Here's our, again, raw data, and if we were to chart our raw data, it would look like this. we can see from this data set that we've selected, and we've selected here the last 12 months of data, or last 13 months I think perhaps. We've got only 2 data points for budget costs, so we're joining those 2 up. When it comes to the progress cost, we can see we've got an awful lot of data here, and many points in some particular months, so we get that sort of view there. And this is raw data exactly as collected, laid out, and you'll see different data points are collected at different points in the month, so they're appearing at different points through those months. But in practice, sometimes we want to see that, but more often we're interested in seeing that cleaned up data set. And so we apply a filter as part of the view. And the view is the collection of instructions that compile the output chart. And there's a part of that that allows you to say, well, I want to time bin my data. And this data is time bin to months. We'll look at examples later that aren't time bin to months, but this one is. So this is time bin to months, and we've said use the last data point in the month if there are multiples. So that's tidied that data point up to the end of the month. Each point will be normalized to the same position. We're not seeing the multiples that appear, we're just seeing the ones, the last one we've got for each month, and we're seeing that move to the end of the month effectively. Then we're saying, well, what happens when we don't have any data points in the month? It could be left blank, but it's not left blank. In this case, we're choosing the last available populated data point. So we did have a budget set earlier than December 17 before it changed to the 24k value, and it might have been, well, by the look of it, something like 23.5k just between the two. And so that's what its prior value was, and we had that at some point in the past, so we brought that forward and dropped it into each month. Now this gets over a really fundamental problem that people have with their reporting. Quite often when they want to do end of month reports or end of week reports, everybody has to update their data at that point in time because you want all the data points to line up. And that could be a real problem when people are away or people forget to do it. You end up with odd looking data in your reports. But this doesn't happen with this approach because the system adjusts all that. It doesn't adjust the numbers, but it just takes the versions that you want and moves them to that point so you get an aligned set of data. Looks much better in terms of the presentation of it. And it hasn't fundamentally changed that data. That is still the latest data point that we have. The project hasn't lost all its actual cost at that point. That's the actual cost, and it should continue through to the current point, which is what it's doing there. So that's really important to get nice clean data so it looks good in a report, and it's still, and it's a proper reflection of the situation rather than just, well, nobody's bothered updating this month, so we're not going to show a value. People will therefore assume it's 0. It's not like that. It interprets that data for you in a meaningful way. And you can then feed that data into a number of different types of analysis. We've got timelines and a timeline chart which is barred, so you've got either a line or a bar arrangement. This one's got 1 property, this one's got 4 properties, and we're using different line colours and line types to distinguish between them. We've got a key of those at the bottom, and we've chosen the axis. So this axis goes from 0. This axis goes from the lowest value, and you can choose all that again as part of your view, depending on the type of data you're collecting and what you want to see. I mean, this is numeric, so this is monetary, and often we like to see those going from 0, which is not giving a false impression about the significant change in the values. If we'd gone from the lowest one, it would have looked like a massive step change for this. But we're giving a relative step change. Here, we're not quite so interested in the relative step change, so we're going from the lowest value so we can see more detail about the information that we've got there. If we wanted multiple properties in here, we could, and we'd see the bars stacked side by side again. And of course, all that's stored and set up in the view. We can also have a table for that, and this is the table that goes with this chart up here. And obviously this is time binned, so we're not seeing that movement as we saw in the last example of a table where we've got some gaps in it. This is a specific chart for showing text-based information. This is our status history chart, and it shows the status movement over time. And it's quite a popular way of seeing, like I see that, and in particular in this case, looking at a block of statuses or the same status for a number of different projects and how that's moved over time. And we'll be unpicking that one in a bit more detail in a minute. And then the value panels here again, showing how a property has changed between two different points in time, the current data bin and the last data bin. So this one's binned on days, so we've got the current day and the prior day. The value is the same, so we've got a equivalent trend arrow we'd have up or down. We can change the font sizes and colors of these things, the labels, the sizes of the blocks, the colors of them, the notes that appear at the bottom, all available for you to change, or of course to use the standard ones that are available off the shelf. So we're going to be looking here at the standard set that come in the 5.2 version of Small Team, Enterprise and Live editions to run against your standard project methods. And the outputs that are available are the sort of analysis window in the Windows application and in the browser application, and that's what we're going to be spending most of our time on picking in a minute. And then we're going to be running some live reports and seeing how that all feeds in as well. So let's go off and have a look at some of that now. So here I am in my Windows application. I'm in a current project, which is the CRM project. And as we mentioned a minute ago, we've got a whole load of properties that are being collected for the project. I can see those here in my summary info form. These are all the properties that we're collecting, whole load of them, as we can see there. In fact, let's just make that so we can see it a bit easier. See the full set. So as we discussed, we've got a load of plan ones. These are actually coming from plans, risks and issues, and it's creating a whole load of different statistics automatically for us. We've got some things we might be typing in, like who the customer is, for example. We've got some things that are coming from our idea recording, like the scores, how good it meets our various corporate alignment requirements, likely costings, expected benefits, all that sort of thing, who's sponsoring it. We've got a whole load of things bringing from benefits, statistics from our benefits spreadsheet, from our finances spreadsheet. We've got some descriptions and commentaries, the typical sort of range of things. It'll vary what you collect depending on the project that you're running and the method type that you're running with it. But once properties come into here, the turning of the current property into a history just happens automatically. It loads the data to the current history table, the current property table, and it says, have I got an existing version of this, and is it the same? If it's the same, it doesn't write to the history. If it's different, it writes to the history, and it'll store the new value and the date and time that changed. So that just happens. You don't need to worry about that at all, and we're going to see some of that in a second. So let's go and have a look at some of that analysis. Again, the analysis is the sort of thing that we can activate from a button on here, should we want to, or we can come up to the menu and pick Project Analysis here. And this one is the current status trend. So we've got all the different statuses that are set up in the project and how they're coming through and how they've changed over time. This is going left to right, so this is the latest value up here, and that's full size. And then they slim back gradually over time just to give that impression of the change in time. And this is using some rules that define the colours that they're going to be. Now what we're going to do here is change this view. Like I say, these are based on what we call views. It's the same terminology we use in lots of other places, which is a definition of something you want to see. So I'm going to load view, and these are the standard set of available trend analysis views that will be in version 5.2. So I want to pick up here the, which one are we going to do? The finance trends. So that goes away and picks up finance trends. We can see that here. So I've got 2 lines. In fact, let's go and pick up a slightly different one. We've got a better version of that, finance timeline, which is the one we were just looking at in the screenshots. So we've got 3 different properties. We can see how those are changing over time, and these are set up to monthly bin, as we saw earlier. Now what I'm going to go away and do is change this value by updating the plan, and we'll see that come through on the updated timeline. And then we'll go in and investigate how this is set up and how it's producing the chart that it is. So let's go and do that. I'm going to go and find my plan for this project. Here it is. And I'm going to check it out. And so to change the actual, what we're interested in, the actual cost, I'm going to come and find one of my tasks down here, and I'm going to put some actual costs against it. So here's me. I'm allocated to here. Just so we can see a change, I'm going to put a significant number of hours against me. So I've currently got allocated hours of 120, an actual of 100. I'm going to make that 200, like that. And we'll see that's upped the cost on here. I should have said with that task. That's all I'm going to do in this particular case. I'm just going to save and close that and check it back in. And that now will have read all its data into the database. If we went back and looked at the raw properties, current values, we'd see that changed. If I come back and look at my chart here and refresh it, you'll see it's now got a latest available data point for December, which has that new value in, and therefore it's worked out that that needs to be updated here. None of the rest of the points have changed, so none of the rest of the points will change in the chart. And in fact, if we go away and look at that raw data, so I'm going to edit the view now. We're going to so we have these standard views, so you get standard analysis, and that's what this one does. It produces this chart. It doesn't actually produce a table currently, but we can make it do that. And rather than picking, so we have it so that most users can just simply load a view and get the thing they want to see using the rules that are centrally set, if you like. But I can go in and edit that if I want to. The first edit I'm going to do is show the table. So come back, and now we see the table of data as well, and we can see our actual cost has gone up from 18 to 19k. It may be a more specific figure than that, but this is using a numbering convention like that. Come back here and we can see that that's the case here. That's what we're trying to get, that presentation of data. Now, this is using currently time bins. So we've been mentioning about time bins already. This is using a monthly one. If I switch off monthly to no time bin, now we see the raw data coming in. And of course, if I switch this back to date time, we would see the actual date time of that data point change. So we can see the budget cost hasn't changed, the progress cost hasn't changed. If we change the percentage complete, it would change the progress cost. And then the actual cost has changed. So this is the raw data that it's collecting behind the scenes. Only stores it when you change it. That's A, very, very efficient for data storage. We're not using any more database space than we need to. And B, we're seeing some actual information about when things happened. And that's really useful when we do go and want to see our timeline unbinned. So here we've got the unbinned one, and we can see how people have been updating their data. Generally, the actual cost has been done pretty reliably, not always at the end of the month. Most months it's been updated. Sometimes it's been frequently, sometimes it hasn't been done for quite a while until it's then done. And that can give you a really useful impression about how people are working on their data. So that's the raw data view. Of course, it's only shown me back to here. We know, because we didn't have a budget of much of a level there, and we can see obviously this has been changing pretty frequently, that there must be some earlier data, but this is again just using a limited data set. Again, if I come back to the view, I can see I'm looking at today minus 12 months. So if I went to today minus 24 months, like that, now we can see all the way back to the original point where we started our project, and we can see that our actual costs and progress costs were changing through the life of the project much earlier. Our current chart was just showing us the last year. We didn't need to see everything, and in fact you might only be interested in the last couple of months, but this is showing me everything. And we can see our budget changed a couple of times actually. It went up, it went down. Obviously the rest of the things changed on a more routine basis, and so all that information is there. And like I say, we often might want to see that a bit normalized, and that's what the time bins are really good for. So when we are running a time bin, so in this case months, you'll see we can run that with the last point in the period, which is what we most commonly do, or the min or the max or the first, or where there are no points in the period, use the previous or previous first, previous last, previous min, previous max. Same idea as these multiple points in the period type set. So that's quite a straightforward thing to do. These are the most common settings that people are using, but you've got the choice to change that if you want to. So this is a really powerful thing for choosing what data you're getting and how that's going to be presented. Now, of course, choice of the properties is important. So these are my 3 properties that I'm charting here. If I wanted to add a 4th property, I would simply browse the available properties here from the list. And as we can see, there's quite a few of those. I'd pick a new one and I would show that on the chart by setting it up. So if we wanted to pick, for example, budget income, which is coming from our spreadsheet, I think, and I can do add. I've now got a 4th point here. I can choose the color scheme for it, so we'll make that something different. We'll make it green. It's a solid line, etc. And so we can see that there. Oh, green solid line, and let's apply that. So there's our data point set up for that. We've got some information about how our chart is working. So we can set its size when that's producing to HTML. And we can then set its size in inches for when we're going to use that in a Word type report. We can choose about keys and titles and where they're going to occur, and we can force a font size if we want to, and then we can choose about the axes. So this is running, x-axis is months in 1 month intervals. Now I've set, in this case 24 months, but I could set 12 or 3 or 6 or whatever I wanted to. I could use it auto and it will decide the intervals, but often we want our intervals to line up against the data bins that we're using, because that makes a bit more sense when we're seeing the output. So you've got all those choices there. Same with y-axis. Like I say, you can set it, as I've done here, so that it autos the max, but the min is running from a set value. It's financial data. I want it coming from 0 so I can see my relative changes properly. But to maximize the space, I could run that autoed as well. And we can see what type of axis we're going to use. So this is numeric because we've got numeric type data. But I can use my, well, in fact it's currency, but it could be either in this case. I can use date, and we'll see some date examples a bit later, or percentage, or value map. And value map allows me to set the points on there so that I can use that to run against text, for example, like status or department or something like that, and show my data in different groupings up my axis based on the text value of that. In fact, I can set up a value map for numbers as well if I wanted to. So I could say that any projects with financial values between 0 and 50 were in category 1, and 50 and 200 were in category 2, and 200 and 1,000 were in category 3. And so I can set the project costs and drop them into different categories like that using a value map setting. We're not doing that in this case. It's much simpler with a numeric. But we can set up how that chart looks. And that's for a timeline chart. So that's showing what we're seeing here. So if I go and rerun that, we can now see that coming through. This is coming from our financial spreadsheet, different set of data actually to this one here. But it's brought it in and charted that accordingly. And I could, of course, if I really like that view that I've got there and I want to use it again and again, I could come back and I could save that view, give it a new name, it'll appear in the saved history. saved views list. Now that will only happen if you're a high level user, admin type user. And so this is about allowing standard users to very quickly and easily pick a chart that they need to use, and they'll get that output by loading a view. So we could come back and look at something different like finish date. And this is showing me something really very different. We're looking at dates against dates, but this date is in months. So we've got the last 12, 13 months, and we're showing the baseline finish date, which obviously changed in March from sometime in October to the 1st of November. And here we've got the current predicted finish date for the project going forwards and forwards as it's changed, as the project is extending out. So that's showing dates against dates. Obviously here we're not expecting it to move, hopefully in month type periods, so this is on a daily scale, and we're seeing how that moves. So a very different sort of analysis, but you can just do that picked straight from the list. If you are a bit more sophisticated and you want to go in and make your own, you can do that. And if you're of a high level ownership, you can save those for other people to use again and again. So that's typical timeline type views. Like I say, you can do exactly the same sorts of things with bars as well. So here's a bar type one, and that's changed over here. So if we come and edit this view, we can see we've got a chart type bar rather than timeline. Other than that, it's very similar. The width of the bar is set when we come back to our properties here by that size element, and so we can see we've got quite a wide one there. We could switch on a number of different properties if we wanted to here and see them, and the colours of course will be picked from the colours that we set here. So this is pretty straightforward to set up and use. Other than that, this will be running a very similar sort of arrangement to the last one, and actually because you can have them and then save them as a new one, you can get some quite consistent approaches set up, and that's the way these have been done. Use the same size each time, so that we set one up and then we change the property and save the next and save it as a new one, and then change the property and save it as a new one, and then we've got everything uniform for when it appears in our reporting, which is quite important thing to do. So those are the timeline type ones. Let's go and choose something different. We'll go back and have a look again at the status block that we did earlier. So this is a range of different statuses showing against time, and so many of these items are going to be the same as they were before. So let's do edit the view. We'll see obviously here we've switched on a status chart. We're not interested in the other type of charts here, and we've got our format, etc. We've got our properties selected. Now when we come and look at these properties, you'll see we've got a value map associated with each one. So this is the value map for project status, and it says to use these colors depending on the status, the value of the item that's present at that period in time. So currently we're getting a green because our status is on track. Back in September we had a red because our status was showing as exception, and this is how it does that. It's the same color tables that we might use when we show that in normal reporting, and we can save a different one for each one. So benefit status has a different heat map or value map for the different items using different colors. Because we use different colors in our benefit spreadsheet, we've got a bit more flexibility about the types of status that we give. And I've chosen in here which order they appear in. The order doesn't particularly matter, but if we were to reuse this value map in a bar chart, we would see them insufficient appearing at the bottom through weak, acceptable, exceptional, and delivered if we plotted our projects against a timeline type display. And these can be saved and reused and reloaded, so you can use them again and again, these value maps. So that's a different element to it, to the last one we saw. Of course, we're using data options again, and they're binned in the same way as before. We're using our time periods. We're not using a timeline chart. We're using a status history chart. And this one, we do decide exactly how this is built. So I set the overall size of the image, 840 pixels across. I set each block as 60, so we've got 12 of those. So we've got 720. I've got a legend width, which is the width of my labels here. And then there's a little bit of a border, obviously, at the end, and that gives me my 840. And I can then set a scale for when I bring that down to a word type arrangement. And obviously, it'll size itself down the page depending on how many properties you've selected. But you can change all these spacing items, etc., to get it exactly as you want it for the sort of space that you're putting it in. And again, I can choose my orientation. I can go left to right or right to left, keys, titles, etc., what to do with the no data cells when we've got no data present in some of them. Or we can change the data labels down here to vertical if we want to, if we're making these slots particularly narrow. So again, you choose exactly how that's set up for when you want to do that, but for most users, they're just going to pick a standard one off the shelf and use it, and it's all nicely pre-configured for them. So we do those for you here, but you can change them yourself if you want to. So that's pretty straightforward, how all that works. Let's have a look at the last one we're going to look at, which is a value panel. So we're going to look at burn rate here. Not relevant or minimally relevant because we don't actually collect that data for this project. So it's a blank looking set. Let's jump to the project where we do collect it, which is one of our agile type projects here. So value panel, here you'll see we've got a good value panel. This is showing us on a data bin which is daily. Today's value is 2. Yesterday's value was 1.2, therefore we've gone up, and we can see the size of the panel, the text, the colours, the comment at the bottom, etc. So let's go and edit one of those and have a look. Of course, this is using value panel. In terms of properties, we've got one property which is our sprint burn rate. Data options, we're using a daily bin, last and previous as before, that doesn't particularly matter up at the top as long as that's covering the 2 days date range that we're using here. And we come to value panel because we're not using either of these other two. And the value panel, very much like the status history chart, we construct exactly what we want here. So I've got a panel which is 250 by 250. Can't quite see both those at the same time. Let's just bring that over here so we can see both of those at the same time. So edit view. So we've got 250 by 250, that's our square. We're scaling that for the word. We've got a little margin around the edge. We've got a display of the dates that we're using here. Footnote, so I can give people a comment about exactly what they're looking at. And then my arrow, I could choose to show it or not show it, and how big it is, and the color it gets for the direction. And then we're showing all the other color schemes down below here and the font arrangements. My overall panel background color, the colors for the various bits of text, current value and previous values, and their font sizes and how we bolding them and all that sort of thing. So we can set this up to be exactly how we want it to be. So that's the one for burn rate. If we go and look at the one for, in fact, none of those are, none of the other ones are specified here as a standard one. They're just used in the reports. So we'll have a look at how those are produced into reports, and we'll do that from here. So here I've got a saved report built into my analysis. So I can click that, it will go and run that saved report for me, and here we'll see a number of value panels. So this is the one we were seeing a second ago, burn rate, and we've got 3 others running here. And we can see they're giving us not a comparison, but just the latest value. And that's showing the latest value on the date that it was collected. And we can go and unpick those a little bit because they're specified in the report. So here are our three different ones. So my sprint proportion is using obviously exactly that same form that we just looked at for managing the view in the live analysis window. But here we can see we're getting a different color, we're bringing back a different property. We can see in particular that we are not using a previous value. So you see we can show previous value, and we're not doing that in this one, we were in the last one. So this allows me to, again, save a block exactly how I want it, and then I can do a save as, change the property, change the color, background color of it perhaps, and then do another one. So I'm getting standardized blocks built up, and as you see, we can then show those really nicely into a report. And when we come into a report, we're merging it with other things. So here we've got a chart loaded from a spreadsheet, some standard properties, current values of them, table from a spreadsheet. We've got some plan information mixed in, some more plan information, some issue information here, into the format that we want in our particular report. Nice and easy, and we can have as many of these appearing alongside other bits of analysis as we want. So we're not interested in that one any further, other than seeing that that can be done. We're going to have a look at all that in the browser again in a minute. So let's jump back to our CRM report and have a look at some reports here as well. So let's do our instant project statement. We've got a new instant project statement report for 2018, which does use some trends. So previously we just used to show the current trend value or the current status value for these standard statuses. Now this time we're using it with the history, and actually the history is trending the other way. So you see in the current version here, and you're seeing the history going back to the right. And down here we're showing the benefits, the benefit budget and the benefits delivered, which is over delivered currently on this project, mixed in with the other sorts of data that we might be collecting into our single page summary. Of course we could show historical statuses for these other things as well, or use all the other bits of data, but some things we're actually interested in the current value and other things we're interested in the history. So we've got a merging of together of those. If we want to see a whole load of things together, switch my report type to the annual review, which shows me, as we can see, a whole load of different trend analysis blocks dropped into a Word report. Nice and quick that was, and this is obviously mixing together some of our standard text. We've got our status block, we've got our finance and benefits, which as we can see is showing that change we just put in earlier. There's the benefit analysis. This is percentage completeness of the project as it's changed over time. Our tracking of the end date against milestone. We've got our milestone timeline, risks and issues. We've got our change budget information here, change impact information here, using bars. And these are mixed with the other standard analyses that we get from the reporting, things like issue stats and say milestone timelines and all sorts of other things, all loaded into the same report. Nice and quick and easy to run a report like that because it's all pre-configured and saved for you. So that was having a look at some of that in the Windows application. Let's go and have a look at some of that in the browser as well. So here I am, I'm in the browser, I've got my particular project selected, and again, if I don't select it from the main navigation window here, I can come up to menu to select my trend analysis, and it will give me the last trend analysis that I chose. Now here we can't go and customize them, we're just picking them from the list. That's the way we work with the browser. We don't see everything, we just see the latest available selected. We see all of the views, but we can't edit them, we just get to choose them. So I could choose completeness, I get my percentage completeness 1, or I could go for my risk trends and see some risk trend information there. Whatever I'm interested in, it'll go away and get them, and again I've got the different tabs here to see that. And I can do these at the portfolio level as well. So if I wanted to do risk trends at the portfolio level, it's going to go away and get me that across the set of projects, which we can see there. So here I've got my paired up risk trends with the number of open risks and the number of risks. So this is for the CRM project here, we can see those, and these are for the other projects down here. It obviously depends on your data completeness, so we can see this project's been running for quite a while. These projects have only been running a shorter period, so they've started later on. And we can do exactly that same sort of thing with all of the views. So if we come to status analysis here, oh, that wasn't the one I wanted. We'll do our status block. We can see that same block of statuses for each of our projects. And again, we could change this to have the project name built into this as well. But these are our various projects, some starting later, some starting earlier. Obviously, that's quite a big set. We might really want to run one of these with just one status set. So we might compare project statuses from the different projects. But as you can see, it doesn't necessarily fill up the spaces going backwards where there's no data. So for projects that start later, you can see they've started that bit later, and some are collected in more detail than others. But you can get that straight into here. And obviously, in exactly the same way, when we come and do our project reporting, so I can come to here, it'll feed in again that same data. So when I come and choose my, for example, project statement 2018 version, we'll get the same sort of analysis that we got when we ran it, to Word in the Windows application. We've got those same items built in here. So all of this works across both interfaces. In the usual mode, you just get to pick the stuff in the browser. You get to edit and manage it from the Windows application because that lines up against typical user roles. So that was the more detailed run through, and I hope you found that useful. If you just wanted a very quick preview, or you want to show that to somebody else in a quick preview mode, please use the intro, which just takes you through that on slides and shows you some screenshots. And if you've got any further questions, or you want to run through that with us personally on web meeting, etc., just contact us and we'll be glad to help. Okay, thank you very much.